She walked into her sister's wedding thinking it was just another insult to survive. She didn't expect to be pushed into a fountain, or to rise from it owning the whole damn room. You ever been to a wedding and just knew deep down you didn't belong there? Not because you weren't invited or anything, you were. But because every smile thrown your way came with a hidden knife? Yeah, that was me. It was my sister's wedding. The kind that looks like it was ripped straight out of a bridal magazine. Grand ballroom at the Fairmont Copley Plaza in Boston. White orchids hanging from chandeliers, gold accented everything. People dressed like royalty. And in the middle of all that splendor, me, Breonna Campbell, standing alone. Wearing a tailored emerald green silk dress, hair swept up, diamond studs in my ears. On the outside, I looked composed. Elegant, even, but on the inside, my stomach was clenched so tight, it felt like it might never unwind. I hadn't seen most of my family in nearly 2 years. By choice, the Campbells are old Boston money. 5-bedroom colonial house on Beacon Hill. Dad's a high-powered attorney. Mom's a former beauty queen turned socialite. My younger sister Isolde, she was always the star. Juilliard grad. Dancer. Charitable foundations. The perfect one. And me? I was the shadow. Growing up, the comparison was relentless. Why can't you be more like your sister? Was basically the family motto. Isolde danced and twirled while I brought home straight A's. She played the violin while I worked part-time jobs to help pay for school. No matter what I did, it was never enough. On my 16th birthday, I thought just maybe my dad would raise a glass and say something kind. I'd worked hard, stayed out of trouble. But instead, he toasted Isolde's acceptance into a summer program at Yale. My birthday cake sat forgotten in the kitchen. That moment stuck. So I built walls. Stopped sharing things. Skipped family holidays. Focused on my career. Because while they were too busy measuring my worth against Isolde's glittering resume, I was quietly building a life of my own. I joined the FBI. Yeah, I know, big jump, right? I went to Boston University, graduated top of my class, and was accepted into the academy at Quantico. Something clicked in me there. Counterintelligence wasn't just a job, it was my calling. I thrived. Fast forward a few years, and I was running operations people, twice my age, were still aspiring to. And yet, not a single member of my family had any idea. They didn't ask. They didn't want to know. It was during one of those operations that I met Cassian, not in the field, like you might think. We met at a cybersecurity conference. He was the keynote speaker. I was there to represent the bureau. And despite everything, sparks flew. Cassian Reed wasn't just some startup guy. He was the founder of Reed Technologies, a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity empire. His company's systems protect everything from governments to global banks. And yet he saw me. Not the awkward older sister. Not the girl who always felt one step behind. He saw me. Understood me. And I think that's what made me fall. We got married 1.5 years later. Quiet ceremony. Just his sister Eliza and my closest coworker, Evander, in attendance. We kept it private not just for security reasons, but because I didn't want my family anywhere near that part of my life. I wanted one sacred thing that wasn't up for their judgment or manipulation. For 3 years, we lived that way, separately, public, deeply connected. Cassian was traveling constantly for work. I was being promoted up the ranks, eventually becoming the youngest deputy director of counterintelligence in FBI history. And still, no one in my family knew. Until the wedding. 6 months ago, an invitation arrived. Thick cardstock, gold foil lettering, dripping with that particular brand of pretension only my parents could perfect. Isolde was marrying Leander Wellington IV. Yes, seriously, heir to a banking empire, legacy Ivy League, the works. Cassian was set to be in Tokyo for a major deal. But he looked at me and said, "I can reschedule." I shook my head. "This is important for Reed Tech." "I'll be fine." He paused. "I'll try to make it back for the reception, even if it's just for the end." And that's how I found myself rolling up to the Fairmont alone. My Audi, one of my few luxuries, pulled into the valet, and I took a deep breath before stepping into the lion's den. Right away, I was reminded that I was just a footnote in my own family. The usher, after scanning the list, said, "Miss Campbell, you're at table 19. Not the family table, of course. Of course. My cousin Rebecca spotted me first. Her expression flickered between surprise and delight, like I'd given her a new gossip topic on a silver platter. "Breonna, you came? Alone?" she asked, her eyes darting to the empty space beside me. "I did," I said evenly. "How brave," she replied. All faux sympathy. "After what happened with that professor. What was his name? The one who left you for his TA?" I blinked. "I've never dated a professor." She smiled sweetly. "Oh, must have been someone else. So easy to confuse things. That was the Campbell's way: create a narrative, spread it like gospel, and leave the rest to your imagination. From there, it only got worse. Aunt Vivian made a snide comment about my practical haircut. Uncle Harold asked loudly if I was still pushing papers for the government and whether I'd considered a better career path. You know, something that actually pays enough to land a husband. Then Tiffany, my sister's maid of honor, walked up all pageant princess smile and air kisses. That dress is gorgeous. Is it from that discount place you always loved? I smiled. Good eye. You always notice details. She didn't catch the sarcasm. Mom showed up shortly after. Designer gown, diamond necklace, probably worth more than my car. She gave me the once-over, eyes scanning for imperfections. That color washes you out, she said eventually. But it's nice you came. And then Isolde made her entrance stunning in a custom Baron gown, arm in arm with her groom. Dad was glowing, beaming. I'd never seen him look at anyone that way, not even once. I was escorted to table 19, which was so far from the main table I practically needed binoculars. My seatmates? Distant cousins, a woman who used to be Mom's college roommate, and 3 elderly relatives who couldn't remember if I was related to the Wellingtons or the Campbells. One leaned over and whispered, "Are you one of the bride's friends?" "No," I replied. "I'm her sister." She blinked. "Oh, I didn't know there was another daughter." "Dat sog. There's klanding and ses. They works. Mansog." That one stung more than I'd like to admit. I tried to eat. Tried to enjoy the elaborate courses. But it felt like I was at a museum, observing my own life from the outside. Then came the speeches. Tiffany gushed about growing up with Isolde, the sister I never had, pointedly ignoring my existence. The best man made jokes about Leander, trading up, by marrying into the Campbell dynasty. And through it all, I sipped water, nodded, smiled politely. Waiting. Cassian texted. Landing shortly. Traffic from Logan is insane. I stood quietly and made my way toward the terrace, needing fresh air and space before things got worse. But I didn't get far. Dad's voice boomed from behind me. "Leaving so soon, Brionna?" I turned. He stood in the center of the ballroom, microphone in hand, facing me. Every eye followed. My mother and sister flanked him, perfectly poised. I suddenly felt like I was 12 again, called to the front of the class for something I didn't do. "Just getting some air," I said calmly. "Running away." "Classic Brionna," he barked. The mic picked up every syllable. "Always disappearing when family matters get tough." People were watching. Whispering. I swallowed hard. "That's not true." "Oh really?" he sneered. "You skipped the bridal shower, the rehearsal dinner. You show up alone, like always. You couldn't even find a date." My jaw clenched. "Dad, this isn't the time or place." "It's exactly the time," he snapped. "This is about family. About excellence. Something you'd know nothing about." He stepped forward, still holding the mic. "You hide behind your little government job, always jealous of your sister's success." That's when it happened. He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backwards, heels catching on the stone patio. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then cold. Ice cold. I hit the water, the fountain. I gasped, silk clinging to my skin. Makeup smearing. Hair collapsing. For a moment, I just sat there. People gasped, then snickered, then laughed. Someone even clapped. And my father? He looked triumphant. My mother hid a smirk behind her flute of champagne. Isolde didn't even try. The photographer snapped a dozen shots. And I realized, this wasn't rock bottom, this was freedom. End of part 1. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, and I'll continue the story right where we left off. I stood up. Water streamed from my emerald dress. Mascara streaked down my cheeks. My heels slipped slightly on the slick marble of the fountain floor as I steadied myself. But I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't small. I stood tall. I looked directly at my father. The same man who had spent decades chipping away at my self-worth, piece by piece. He looked smug until he saw my face. I wasn't broken. I was awake. "Remember this moment," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but somehow it carried across the courtyard. "Remember exactly how you treated me." He blinked. The laughter started to fade. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Remember the decisions you made," I added. "Because I will." Then I stepped out of the fountain. The crowd parted as I walked. Not a single hand reached out. Not even for a towel. My dripping dress left a trail on the expensive carpet. But I didn't care. I was done pretending. I headed straight for the bathroom. Inside, I found myself face to face with a gold-framed mirror. My hair was plastered to my head. My dress clung in all the wrong places. I looked like a drowned wreck. And still, I felt light. I felt more myself than I had in years. My phone, I'd left it at table 19. I walked back out, still dripping, and retrieved it from a cousin who'd been guarding it like it might explode. Text from Cassian. Almost there. 10 minutes. Everything okay? I typed back. Dad pushed me into the fountain. In front of everyone. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then disappeared. Then came back. Finally, his reply. 10 minutes, I'm coming. I didn't know it at the time, but he'd already mobilized his security team. Just then, a young woman walked into the restroom. I vaguely recognized her, someone from Leander's side. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Just a little wet." She hesitated. "That was awful. I'm so sorry. That shouldn't have happened." Her kindness nearly broke me. It was the first genuine thing anyone had said to me all day. "I have a spare dress in my car," she offered. "It might be a bit big, but..." I smiled. "That's really thoughtful, but I actually keep a backup outfit in my trunk. Work habit." She nodded. "Want me to come with you to the valet? It might be easier to avoid the crowd." "Please," I said, touched by her decency. Her name was Maris. Leander's step-cousin from his mom's second marriage. We walked out through a side door together. "The Wellington side is a mess," she joked. "You should see the group chats." I laughed for the first time that day. Out at the car, I popped my trunk and pulled out a black sheath dress and flats. I always kept emergency clothes standard for someone in my line of work. Within 10 minutes, I was changed. Presentable, professional. In the mirror, I reapplied fresh makeup and pulled my hair back. I looked calm, clean, controlled. And then I remembered something that hit me right in the chest. Not a single ounce of validation I needed in life ever came from those people back in that ballroom. Everything I'd achieved, I'd done on my own. And with Cassian. With Evander. With my team. They were my family. Not the ones who applauded when I fell into a fountain. Not the ones who forgot my birthday or dismissed my work as paper pushing. I checked the time. Cassian would be here any minute. And this time, I wasn't going to hide. Back at the ballroom, I waited near the entrance. The music was back on. The bar was crowded. My mother was holding court with her usual circle of socialites, all pearls and shrill laughter. As I walked past, I heard her voice. "It's always been hard," she said dramatically. "We did everything for her. Everything. The best schools, the best therapists. But some people just refused to thrive. And second died at, well, rectedfeel.com from it." One of her friends clucked her tongue. "Shame, really, especially with Isolde being so luminous." My mother nodded, then added, "We've accepted it. Brionna will never." She froze, because I was standing right there, dry, dignified, watching her unravel mid-performance. "You look dry," she said quickly, trying to recover. "I always keep a spare," I replied. "Professional habit." Her friends muttered excuses and disappeared. I stepped closer. Was pushing me into a fountain part of the wedding itinerary? Or did Dad improvise? Her face twisted. "Don't be so dramatic. You were sulking. Your father simply ran out of patience. The Rever. Techni. Pushing your adult daughter into a fountain isn't exactly a standard emotional response," I replied flatly. "You could have brought a date. You could have made an effort." I didn't think I needed to impress anyone. Her mouth opened to respond, but before she could speak, something happened. Car doors slammed outside. Multiple, quick, coordinated. A low murmur ran through the room. Then, 2 sharply dressed men stepped into the ballroom. Dark suits. Earpieces. Professional. Serious. My mother frowned. "What is this? Did the Wellingtons order extra security?" I just checked my watch. Right on time. A sleek black Maybach pulled up out front, along with 2 identical vehicles behind it. The ballroom doors opened again. This time, with quiet authority. Evander walked in first, followed by Dmitri. Both scanned the room with quiet efficiency. The chatter faded into a hush. My father stormed forward, puffed up like a courtroom lion. "Excuse me," he barked. "This is a private event. If you're looking for the corporate conference, it's down the hall." Evander didn't even blink. Dmitri tapped his earpiece. "Perimeter secure. Proceeding." And then, Cassian walked in. It was like a shift in gravity. You could feel it in the room. He filled the doorway not just physically, but energetically. 6'2". Swimmer's shoulders. Tom Ford tuxedo. Hair tousled slightly from wind. Face calm, focused. His eyes scanned the crowd, and then locked on me. Everything else disappeared. He walked toward me, the crowd parting like water around a ship. He moved with complete ease, like he was born to do this. Behind him, more security quietly positioned themselves along the perimeter. "Brionna," he said as he reached me, taking my hands gently. His thumbs rubbed across my knuckles, a small private gesture only I'd recognize. "Sorry I'm late." "You're right on time," I whispered. Then he kissed me. Nothing dramatic, just real, steady, grounding. He turned toward my mother. Mrs. Campbell, he said politely, though not warmly. I'm Cassian Reed, Briona's husband. Mabaris faring. Mologies in the prade. Mologies in the praz. You could practically hear the glass shattering in her mind. Husband? She squeaked. But Briona never mentioned. 3 years next month, he said with a calm smile. We prefer privacy. For security reasons. My father had made his way through the stunned guests and now stood beside her, flushed and angry. What is the meaning of this? He snapped. Hiring security and some actor for a spectacle? Briona, this is a new low even for you. Cassian didn't flinch. His voice dropped slightly. I'm Cassian Reed, CEO of Reed Technologies. Your daughter and I have been married for nearly 3 years. The name hit like a gong. Reed Technologies, one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the world. $1 billion valuation. Household name. A guy near the back of the room shouted, Holy, that's really him! Forbes cover. Net worth? 12 billion, gasps. Murmurs. Disbelief. My mother swayed slightly. My father's jaw hung slack, and in that moment, everything began to change. My father still hadn't spoken. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked like he was glitching, like someone had fed the wrong code into a machine that ran entirely on ego and control. My mother finally managed something. Her voice was pitched too high. Fragile. But why wouldn't you tell us? Her question wasn't laced with accusation this time. It was genuine, bewildered. Maybe even frightened. I looked at her, really looked. For the first time in my life, I saw the cracks behind the glamour. And for once, I didn't feel small. I answered honestly. When have you ever asked about my life, mother? When have you ever wanted to know? Cassian stepped forward, his hand still resting protectively at the small of my back. As for me, he said calmly, I've been looking forward to meeting the family Briona has described so vividly. He looked around the room slowly, purposefully. Though I'll admit, after what I just witnessed, I find myself rather disappointed. My father found his voice again just barely. Now listen here, young man. No, Mr. Campbell. Cassian cut in, his tone turning razor sharp. You listen. The room went silent again. Even the music had stopped. I watched you humiliate your daughter, he said. I saw you push her into that fountain. I heard every cruel word. My father looked like he'd been punched, pale, speechless. Under normal circumstances, Cassian continued, an assault like that would result in immediate consequences. My security team was prepared to intervene. But Briona signaled them to stand down. His voice softened. That's who your daughter is. Even after everything, she didn't want to ruin her sister's wedding. The crowd was still frozen. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Somewhere in the back, I heard someone mutter. What the hell is happening? Cassian went on. Fortunately for you, my wife is a better person than I am. Because if anyone ever touches her like that again, I won't be nearly so restrained. That threat? It was delivered with perfect grace. Civil, quiet, devastating. And right on cue, the ballroom doors opened once more. 2 people stepped inside, impeccably dressed. Intentional posture. Calm and commanding. Evander and Sophia, my team. They walked straight up to us. Sophia stopped a few feet away, tablet in hand. Director Campbell, she said, her voice clear and crisp. Apologies for the interruption, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention. It took a beat for her words to land in the room. Director? The whispers started instantly. Did she say director? Director of what? Wait. She's in charge of something? My father furrowed his brow. Director of what? Some municipal office? Cassian didn't miss a beat. Your daughter, he said, with the calm of someone delivering a final chess move, is the youngest deputy director of counterintelligence operations in FBI history. More gasps. One woman visibly clutched her pearls. Another cousin dropped her champagne glass. My mother looked faint. My father looked like he'd aged 20 years in 3 minutes. He stepped back, blinking. Processing. Then, from behind them, Isolde appeared. She had finally made her way to the commotion. Her pristine white gown shimmered beneath the chandeliers, her hair still pinned perfectly. What's going on? She demanded. Who are these people? My mother turned to her slowly. Apparently, your sister has a husband. Isolde's face twisted. That's ridiculous. She's making this up. For attention. On my wedding day. Cassian didn't flinch. Mrs. Wellington, he said, his tone gentlemanly but firm. Congratulations on your marriage. I'm sorry I missed the ceremony. International business in Tokyo delayed me. She blinked. Blinked again, completely thrown off script. Then, from the crowd, one of Leander's groomsmen shouted, Yo, he's not kidding. That's Cassian Reed, I just Googled him. Forbes, Wall Street Journal, he's the real deal. More phones came out, faces lit up. People zoomed in on Cassian's photos, comparing him with the man in front of them. The room buzzed like a beehive set on fire. My mother sat down hard. My father shook his head. This is absurd. Brionna? Our Brionna? Married to a tech billionaire? Cassian turned, locking eyes with him. Yes, your daughter, the one you shoved into a fountain in front of 200 people. That Brionna. I felt Cassian's arm tighten slightly around my waist. She's brilliant. Resilient. One of the most capable people I've ever met, he continued. And she's mine. Not because she needed someone to save her, but because I saw what you never bothered to look for. My father was trying to speak again, but the words weren't forming. Sophia held up the tablet. Director, we do need your authorization before we proceed. I nodded, suddenly back in work mode. I took the tablet, reviewed the information, and gave the order. Proceed with option 2, increase surveillance on the secondary target. I'll join the call in 20 minutes. Yes, ma'am, she said. Then stepped back into formation with Evander. The ballroom, you could hear a pin drop. Cassian checked his watch. We should go. The chopper's waiting. Tokyo crew expects us on the video call at 9. I turned to face my family one last time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply said, congratulations on your wedding, Isolde. I wish you and Leander all the best. Isolde stared. She looked like she'd swallowed glitter and it had cut her on the way down. To his credit, Leander approached and extended a hand. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Reed. Director Campbell. He said sincerely. I hope we can get to know each other better. I shook his hand. I'd like that, Leander. My parents? They didn't move. Statues. Ghosts. Caught in the collapse of their own fiction. Cassian gave them a courteous nod. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry I missed the ceremony. Then my father finally said something. Weakly. Brionna, wait. I paused. We need to talk, he said. We're your parents. We've always wanted the best for you. We've always been proud. I shook my head. No, Dad. You haven't. But that's okay. I don't need you to be proud of me anymore. Then Cassian and I walked out of the ballroom, flanked by our security team. Behind us, the chatter exploded. Wedding guests scrambling to rewrite everything they thought they knew. But I didn't care, because I was done performing, and I was finally free. The rooftop of the Fairmont Copley Plaza wasn't built for drama. But that night, it got plenty. The chopper was waiting. Its sleek black frame gleamed beneath the floodlights, the blades already starting to rotate in slow, deliberate circles. Cassian and I walked side by side, our security team around us in a quiet perimeter. And behind us, the ballroom was still buzzing, still unraveling. Cassian leaned close so I could hear him over the rising hum. Are you okay? Surprisingly, I was. Better than okay, I said. Just then, Sophia caught up to us. Her expression was serious, too serious. Director, she said in a hushed voice. We have a complication. The ambassador is requesting you at the embassy immediately. There's been chatter, anomalous signals picked up in the surveillance package. Cassian's jaw tightened. Is this real, or someone pulling strings? Real, Sophia said. Evander is already in contact with the field team. It's time sensitive. Without hesitation, I nodded. Reroute the chopper to the embassy. Alert the duty analyst. I want a full briefing the moment I land. Sophia gave a sharp nod and stepped away to relay the instructions. Cassian turned to me. Go. I'll meet you there. This was why we worked. We had both built our lives in high-stakes arenas, and while that meant we often missed dinners and birthdays, it also meant we understood each other's priorities. No guilt, no resentment. Just rock-solid partnership. As we neared the roof access door, intending to descend and leave through the hotel's private gate, a figure stepped into our path. It was my mother, breathless, disheveled. Her hair no longer perfectly coiffed. Her eyes glassy, like she'd seen a ghost. Brionna, she said. Her voice wavered, uncertain. You can't just leave. I stopped. Cassian stood back slightly to give us space, but I could still feel his presence beside me. We need to talk, she continued. Please. I took a breath. I have a job emergency. National security doesn't pause for family reconciliations. Her eyes widened. National security? Like she was only now realizing it wasn't a performance. You really are who they said you are? Yes. I'm Deputy Director of Counterintelligence Operations. And have been for the past 18 months. She stared at me, searching for something familiar. For the first time, she didn't seem angry or condescending. She just seemed lost. But why didn't you tell us? She asked again. We would have been proud? I finished for her. Or would you have found a way to reduce it? Maybe say I got the job through luck or connections? Or compare it to Isolde's dance awards. She flinched. That alone told me everything. And the marriage, she whispered. 3 years? 3 years. I confirmed. And you never once asked me about my personal life. You never wanted to know unless you could use it as a point of comparison. She blinked fast, like she was holding something back. Emotion. Maybe even tears. I kept my voice steady. We kept the marriage private for lots of reasons. Cassian's business makes him a target. My job involves classified work. But honestly, I just wanted one part of my life to be safe from this family's scrutiny. She nodded slowly. No denial, no twisting of facts, just silence. I have to go, I said, glancing toward the chopper. There's a real threat. Lives could be at stake. Will you come back? She asked. And this time, her voice held something that resembled real vulnerability. I hesitated. That was the thing. For 32 years, I had wanted that question, that opening, that sliver of acknowledgement, and now that it was here, I didn't know what to do with it. I don't know, I said honestly. It depends. On what? She asked. On whether you want to know the real me, or just the version of me that finally meets your standards. She didn't answer. But she didn't try to stop me either. As Cassian and I boarded the helicopter, I looked back one last time. My mother stood there alone on the rooftop, a tiny figure against the sprawling Boston skyline. And for the first time, I didn't see her as the intimidating matriarch who had controlled my childhood. I saw a woman who had built her identity around social status and control, and now, that identity was collapsing. I felt something unexpected, compassion. We lifted off. 10 minutes later, we landed on the roof of the U.S. Embassy, where the situation turned out to be real, but manageable. False signals, potentially decoys, possibly a test run. My team handled it within hours. By 11 p.m., Cassian and I were finally back home. Our penthouse overlooked the Charles River. Floor-to-ceiling windows glowed with the reflection of city lights dancing on the water. Cassian loosened his tie and leaned against the terrace railing. Some wedding. I kicked off my shoes and joined him. Not how I imagined introducing you to the family. He smirked. Honestly, I thought it went pretty well. Your dad's face when Evander called you director. That alone was worth showing up late. I laughed. A real laugh. He deserved that, I said. For everything. Cassian turned to me. Your mother followed you. That's not nothing. No. I agreed. But 32 years of behavior don't change in an evening. They don't, he said. But revelations have a funny way of cracking the surface. He pulled me into his arms. I'm with you, he whispered. Whether you want to rebuild something with them or keep the distance, I'll support whatever you choose. That was love. Not conditional approval. Not silent expectations. Just unwavering support. I rested my head against his chest. The quiet hum of the city buzzed in the background. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to clap for me. I had my own peace now. Later that night, as I curled into bed, my phone buzzed. I expected another work update. But it was from Maris. Oh my God. The family is in total meltdown mode. Your dad keeps saying there's been a mistake. Your mom hasn't spoken in an hour. Isolde locked herself in the bridal suite. Also, I googled your husband. Holy crap. Also, thank you for being kind to me. Want to grab a drink sometime? Signed, your new favorite cousin. I showed the text to Cassian. He raised an eyebrow. New favorite cousin? She was the only person who showed me basic decency tonight, I said. Offered me a dress. Walked me to the valet. Didn't flinch when I looked like a drowned cat. Cassian smiled. Sometimes allies come from unexpected places. Over the next hour, my phone lit up like it never had before. Distant relatives, cousins who had never even remembered my birthday. People texting to say they were so proud, or always knew I was special, or my favorite, we should catch up soon. Even my father sent a formal message. Briona, we need to speak. At your earliest convenience. I silenced the phone and set it aside. They're not texting me, I told Cassian. They're texting the version of me that walked into that ballroom with an entourage and a billionaire husband. They're texting Director Campbell. Does that surprise you? He asked gently. No, I said. But it does make everything clearer. I rolled over, pulling the blanket up to my chin, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I needed their approval. I had built something better. 3 weeks after the wedding, Cassian and I were sitting at our favorite corner table inside Thinking Cup Cafe on Newbury Street. It wasn't flashy or exclusive, just cozy, unassuming, and perfect. The kind of place where you could be two people, not two titles. No Director Campbell. No Forbes-featured billionaire. Just us. The air was crisp, the Boston fall in full bloom. Outside the window, trees along Commonwealth Avenue had turned to fire. Gold, crimson, deep amber. The street bustled with pedestrians bundled in scarves, carrying coffee cups and grocery bags. Life moving forward. Unbothered. Cassian stirred his Americano and glanced at me. Your mother called again yesterday. I raised my eyebrows. That's 3 times this week. He nodded. Left another voicemail. Invited us to Sunday dinner. I didn't answer immediately. Just watched a young couple with matching backpacks walk by. Their laughter fogging the glass for a moment. Are you thinking about it? He asked, his tone neutral. He never pushed. Just left space for me to be honest. I'm not sure. I admitted. Part of me thinks it's a performance. That she's trying to get back into the spotlight now that she knows who I married. But, I trailed off. But? He prompted gently. There were moments, I said. Brief ones at the wedding and after where she seemed different. Tentative. Like maybe she was trying to understand. Cassian nodded, but said nothing. He let me think. My father sent a follow-up message. I continued. This one less formal. He asked questions. Intelligent ones, actually about your company. About the cyber defense contract you just signed with the federal government. He wasn't trying to show off. He genuinely seemed curious. Cassian leaned back, watching me. And my mother, I sighed. She dropped off a box last weekend. My old stuff. Trophies from debate competitions. Medals from science fairs. Newspaper clippings. I didn't even know she'd kept those things. That's not nothing. He said. No. It's not. But the most surprising moment came the following evening. Isolde called. She didn't text. She didn't send a formal message. She actually picked up the phone and called me. That alone was shocking. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? A long pause. Then, hey, her voice was quieter than usual, less polished. I was wondering if we could talk, she said. I hesitated. About what? About everything. So we met the next day. Not at the family estate, not at a restaurant, but at the small park near the house we grew up in. The one with the duck pond and crooked bench we used to fight over. She was already there when I arrived. Wearing jeans, a long coat, and zero makeup. That alone was a revelation. We sat in silence for a while, just watching the water. I didn't know, she said finally. About your job. About your husband. About your life. I kept my eyes on the pond. You never asked. I know. She was twisting her wedding ring anxiously. I think I liked being the favorite. It was easier. Easier not to question anything. Her honesty surprised me. Leander says I need to examine why I felt threatened by your success, she continued. He thinks we should both consider therapy. Together, family therapy. I turned to look at her for the first time. Really look. Behind the picture-perfect face and flawless posture, I saw cracks, uncertainty, maybe even remorse. I'll think about it, I said. Not today. But maybe. Eventually. She nodded. That's fair. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was an opening, a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. The weeks that followed were uneven. Sunday dinners resumed, but they were different now. Stiffer. Quieter. My parents were no longer the reigning monarchs of every conversation. They fumbled. They apologized awkwardly, sometimes poorly, but it was more than I'd ever got. My father enrolled in anger management therapy. Not immediately, of course. He resisted. Raged. But eventually, he showed up. Sat through the sessions. Began to listen. My mother stopped pretending everything was perfect. Occasionally, she even asked about my work, not in a gossipy way, but with genuine interest. We weren't healed. But we were. Adjusting. And then one night, my mother and I took a walk. It was late spring. The air smelled like blooming magnolias. She held my arm loosely as we strolled past old brownstones. You know, she said. I used to sneak into your room after you fell asleep. I blinked. What? When you were a little girl, she said. You always looked so peaceful. Like you were carrying the weight of something, even in your dreams. I didn't know what to say. I kept every one of your certificates, she added. Every award. I just didn't know how to tell you. I was proud. I stopped walking. Why? Because I was afraid it would make you stop trying, she admitted. Isolde didn't need pushing. You responded to pressure. No, I said quietly. I responded to pain. That's not the same thing. She looked away. I see that now. We walked in silence for a bit longer. Progress wasn't a straight line. Some dinners ended in slammed doors. Some conversations reopened old wounds. But there were also moments of laughter. Memories resurfaced that didn't sting. Small signs of something new. But the biggest change? It was inside me. I no longer measured my worth by their praise. I didn't need them to understand everything about me. I didn't require them to cheer for me. Or even believe me. I had Cassian. I had my team. I had myself. I stopped shrinking to fit their expectations. I stopped biting my tongue. I set boundaries, and for the first time, they held. 1 year after the wedding, Cassian and I hosted a dinner party at our home, but not for show. Not for status. We invited the people who mattered. FBI colleagues, Cassian's sister, friends who had stood beside us in quiet, consistent ways. Even Maris came, her new boyfriend in tow. A few extended family members were there too, ones who had shown real change, not just social recalibration. As I stood in our kitchen, plating dessert, Cassian wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You okay?" he asked softly. I looked through the open doorway. My father was laughing with Evander, swapping fishing stories. My mother was showing Maris photos of her garden. Isolde and Leander were helping clear plates, giggling like teenagers. Not perfect, not fixed, but real. "Yeah," I said. "I'm really okay." Cassian kissed my cheek. "Happy?" I leaned into him. "I am. And like that there see call gesten replater and send dating from this." Walks in the safe, because in that moment, surrounded by the people who showed up, who stayed, who tried, I realized something deep and unshakable. Family isn't just blood. Family is who celebrates your victories without envy. Who holds space for your voice. Who grows with you. And sometimes, that family is the one you choose. The thing about healing? It doesn't come with a finish line. No big celebratory ribbon at the end. No trumpet blaring when you've officially moved on. Healing, I've learned, is more like a quiet shift in rhythm. You don't notice the beat changing until you realize you've stopped bracing for impact. That's what it felt like in the months after the wedding. My family, well, the parts that wanted to began learning a new language. The language of accountability, of curiosity, of earning rather than expecting. And I learned how to receive without suspicion. Cassian and I fell into a steadier pace. We traveled less, at least for a while, spent more evenings curled up on our terrace, feet tucked beneath us, sipping wine and watching the city lights ripple on the Charles River. One particular night stands out. It was just past midnight. We'd wrapped up a late dinner with some contacts from DC official business on my end, investor relations on his. After they left, we stayed up, just talking. No suits, no strategies, just us. Cassian reached over, laced his fingers with mine. "I know this wasn't the life you imagined," he said. "The secrecy, the security, the chaos." I looked at him, slightly amused. "You mean the part where I married a billionaire and became a federal target?" He grinned. "Something like that. I didn't imagine any of it," I said honestly. "But somehow, it fits." And it did. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Cassian wasn't just a CEO. He wasn't a prop in my redemption arc. He was the man who sat with me on the bathroom floor after my first field operation went sideways. The one who flew home from Singapore when I had surgery for a burst appendix, even though I swore I didn't need him. The one who memorized my coffee order, my security passphrase, and the exact way I like my blankets folded. We were built on trust. Mutual admiration. Quiet moments stacked like bricks, and part of that trust was knowing we each had scars. One evening, I finally told him something I'd never said aloud. Not even to myself. "It wasn't just about not feeling seen," I said, staring at the skyline. "It was the way being invisible became safe." Cassian didn't push, he just waited. "I used to think if I could make myself small enough, quiet enough, useful enough, they'd finally stop criticizing me," I whispered. But shrinking didn't make them love me. It just made me disappear. He reached for my hand, warm and steady. "I see you." And for the first time, I believed it wasn't just a nice thing to say. He meant it. That night, I slept without waking once. The following month, Isolde sent me an email. Not a text. Not a phone call. An actual email with a subject line that read, "Something different, just read it please." Inside was a letter. Hand-typed. No emojis. No filters. "Briona, I've spent most of my life being loved for how I looked and how I danced. You spent yours being judged for how you didn't. I didn't see that before. I didn't want to see it. But after the wedding, after watching how you carried yourself, how you stood in that fountain like you owned it, I realized I'd confused praise with value. You never needed their spotlight. You had your own light all along. I'm not asking for a do-over. I'm just asking for a start. Love, Isolde." I read it 3 times. Then I cried. Not because it fixed everything, but because it didn't pretend to. It was raw. Honest. Unearned. And sometimes, unearned grace is the rarest kind. We started having coffee once a week. Nothing deep at first, mostly surface-level sister talk. But every now and then, something real would sneak through. Like the day she asked, "What's the scariest thing about your job?" And I said, "Making the wrong call." Trusting the wrong person. She nodded slowly, looking into her cup. That applies to more than just national security. And I knew she wasn't talking about my work. I told Cassian about it later that night. She's trying, I said. In her own way. He smiled. And you're letting her. I shrugged. Growth is mutual. By early summer, our lives had settled into a rhythm that felt more intentional. We hosted quarterly dinners, not as grand statements, but as grounding rituals. I opened more doors for conversation with my parents, but I also set clear limits. They didn't always get it right. There were slip-ups. Passive-aggressive comments. Moments where the old patterns clawed their way back, but the difference now, I called them out, and they listened. My father once tried to compare one of my operations to Isolde's foundation fundraiser. I cut him off mid-sentence. Dad, this isn't a competition, I said flatly. And if you keep treating our lives like a scoreboard, I'll start sitting out again. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he said, "You're right," and that was that. One day, out of nowhere, my mother handed me a small velvet box. I opened it cautiously, half expecting some heirloom guilt trip. Inside was a brooch. A simple, elegant piece with a sapphire at the center. "It was my grandmother's," she said. "I wore it at my wedding. I want you to have it." I stared at her, unsure. "I don't expect this to fix anything," she added. "But I want you to know I see you now. Not just as an extension of me. As a woman. A leader. A daughter." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. And it was enough. I wore that brooch the next time I briefed the Senate Intelligence Committee. Just tucked inside my jacket. No one else noticed, but I did. It reminded me that you can carry pieces of your past without letting them define you. A year after the fountain, I walked past that same spot while attending a fundraising gala for cybersecurity education. The hotel had refurbished the courtyard. New lights. Polished tile. The fountain gleamed like it had no memory, but I did. I stood there for a minute, alone. Then I heard footsteps. Cassian. He came up beside me, hands in his pockets, jacket slung over one arm. "Still your least favorite wedding venue?" I smiled. "Nah. I think it's earned its redemption arc." He chuckled, then paused. "If you could go back, would you skip it? The wedding?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "It was awful. But it cracked everything open. And sometimes, pain is the only way truth gets through." He nodded, looking at the water. "Then I'm glad we didn't skip it." "So am I. Because that night in the fountain, that wasn't humiliation, that was baptism. Into a new identity. A new family. A new truth. Mine. The next chapter of my life didn't come with fireworks. No grand declarations. No sudden turning points. It was quieter than that, like a room slowly filling with light. Work kept moving at full throttle. Counterintelligence doesn't sleep. And being deputy director meant I had my hands in everything from threat assessments to international briefings to managing high-level assets. The stakes were always high, but I had a team I trusted. People like Evander and Sophia who didn't just execute orders, they anticipated problems before they formed. At home, Cassian was deep in an acquisition project. ReadTech had just absorbed a cutting-edge Israeli encryption startup, and between regulatory approvals and integration headaches, his days were long and his nights, well, short. Still, we made time for each other. We had a rule. 2 dinners a week with no phones. No email, no discussions about cyber attacks or data migration, just us. One of those dinners happened at a tiny Italian place tucked behind a bookstore in Beacon Hill. We'd just finished splitting a bowl of handmade tagliatelle when I said something I hadn't planned. "I want to write a book." Cassian set his fork down slowly. "About what?" "My experience," I said. "But not a memoir. Not a tell-all. Something useful. Something that might help other women in male-dominated fields, especially the ones who've had to fight for their voice." He nodded. "You should. You don't think it would cause security complications? You'll figure out what can be shared and what can't," he said. "But I think you owe your story to someone." "To who?" "To the woman you were in that fountain." That shut me up for a second, because he was right. That version of me, the one standing soaked, mascara running, dress clinging, dignity intact, she deserved to be heard, not just as a cautionary tale, but as proof that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the stillness after the storm. I didn't start writing right away. I wasn't ready, but I did begin collecting thoughts. Observations. Quiet truths I'd carried for years but never spoken aloud. Things like, being invisible in your own family makes you hyper-visible everywhere else. Success doesn't fix trauma, it just gives you better furniture to sit on while you unpack it. Silence is easy, boundaries are hard, and sometimes, the people who taught you to shrink will never celebrate when you grow. One day, I got a text from Maris. "So, my mom invited your mom to lunch, voluntarily. What timeline are we living in?" I laughed out loud. Maris had become an unexpected constant in my life. What started as a kind gesture with a spare dress turned into late-night memes, book swaps, and deep conversations about how families can both break us and shape us. We grabbed coffee once a week, sometimes with her boyfriend, a sweet, slightly awkward tax attorney named Derek, who adored her in the kind of quiet, consistent way you pray someone will. Over almond croissants and iced chai, she asked, "Do you think they've really changed? Your parents?" I paused. "They've shifted," I said. "That might be more accurate than changed. Is that enough for you?" I considered that. It's enough for me to engage, not enough to rely on. But that's okay. I don't need them to be my emotional home anymore. She smiled. That's probably the healthiest thing I've ever heard anyone say about family. Non paces witende. Mening and not peace. And mening to me. That summer, Cassian and I took our first real vacation in over a year, not a business trip tacked onto a weekend. A real, honest to goodness, phones off, auto reply on getaway. We chose Iceland. Cold, stark, beautiful in a way that doesn't try to impress you, it just is. We hiked glaciers, bathed in hot springs, watched the northern lights wrap around the sky like silk. One night, as we stood alone in the dark, stars blinking above us, Cassian said, "If you ever want to disappear, we could do it. Just drop everything. Buy a cabin. Make our own rules." I looked at him. "I don't want to disappear," I said. "I want to be seen. Just. On my terms. Every four there are de long Thames." He nodded. "Then let's keep building that world." When we got back to Boston, I found a letter waiting for me. Not an email. Not a card. A proper letter. Handwritten, from my father. His handwriting was still neat. Sharp. But the tone? Completely different. "Brionna, I've spent most of your life misunderstanding you. Not because you weren't clear, but because I refused to listen. I confused control with love. Expectations with support. I thought I was pushing you to succeed, when really, I was just pushing you away." The wedding opened my eyes. Not just to who you are but to who I've been. I'm not asking for a second chance. I'm asking for a first one. To know you. The real you. Not the version I tried to mold. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. Each time, I expected to feel something different. Anger, resentment, even mockery. But I didn't. I felt peace. Because I finally understood. That letter wasn't for the girl he raised. It was for the woman I'd become despite him, and maybe that was enough. One weekend, Isolde invited me to one of her performances. She'd choreographed a new piece. Something personal. Introspective. A solo. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when she stepped onto the stage barefoot, hair loose, no glitter, no dramatics, I knew it wasn't just a performance, it was a conversation, with me. With herself, with our entire history. After the final bow, she ran to me backstage and threw her arms around me. "I made it for you," she said. I didn't know how else to say thank you. I hugged her back, tighter than I had in years. It said everything. That night, Cassian and I walked home in the soft city twilight. He didn't say anything for a while. Just held my hand as we passed familiar storefronts and quiet brownstones. Then he said, "You know, I think that fountain gave birth to more than just one new version of you." I smiled. "Yeah. It gave birth to a family that chooses each other. Not one that tolerates each other. Instead of the crowd, and then a rating that once night. And that," he said, "is the only kind of family worth fighting for." I squeezed his hand, because he was right, and for once, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I was fighting to keep seeing myself. The thing about redefining family is, people don't always know what to do with the new version of you. They hesitate, they test boundaries, sometimes without realizing it. Old patterns tug at the edges of even the most well-meaning reconnections. And yet, there's beauty in how awkward growth can be. One Saturday morning, my mother called, not texted, not emailed. She called. I hesitated before answering. Our recent interactions had been civil, even warm, but this felt loaded. "Hi, Mom," I said. There was a pause. Like she was still deciding how to begin. "I was wondering," she said slowly, "if you and Cassian would join us for brunch next Sunday." I blinked. "Us? Your father and I. No guests. No cousins. Just us." I didn't respond right away. She added quickly, "I've been practicing something. Listening without interrupting." That made me smile. "I'd like that." The following Sunday, Cassian and I arrived at my parents' townhouse at 11 sharp. It looked the same as always, pristine, polished, intimidating in the way old money often is, but something felt different. When my mother opened the door, she wasn't dressed like she was hosting a magazine spread. No pearls. No dramatic heels. Just soft flats, a linen dress, and hair pulled back loosely. My father greeted us without his usual stiffness. He even poured Cassian a cup of coffee without being prompted. We sat around the sunroom table, light streaming in through tall windows, and for the first 10 minutes, no one mentioned jobs, titles, or recent accomplishments. It was small talk, weather, neighborhood renovations. Cassian complimented the landscaping, and my father lit up. Apparently he'd been obsessively managing the garden since retirement. Then, halfway through brunch, my mother turned to me and said, "What does a day in your life look like?" I nearly choked on my mimosa. "You mean a workday?" She nodded. "I just realized recently that I don't actually know. Not the title. Not the public-facing version. What it feels like to do what you do. What it costs." I looked at her, searching for irony. But there was none, so I told her. Not in code, but in careful truth. I told her about the early mornings. The late nights. The responsibility of signing off on missions that could change the course of global events. I told her what it's like to carry classified information in your head. To not be able to sleep because you're still replaying every detail of a failed surveillance op. I told her about the weight, the silence, the sharpness of needing to be right, because if you're wrong, people don't just get fired. They die. And to her credit, she didn't blink. She didn't brush it off or pivot the conversation or change the subject to Isolda's latest press feature. She just listened. And when I finished, she said, "That sounds lonely." I exhaled. "Sometimes. But I've built a life that doesn't leave me there." Cassian reached under the table and gently squeezed my hand. My father cleared his throat. "I may not have understood you for most of your life. But I'd be honored to learn now." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. But it was real. And that was enough. Later that afternoon, Cassian and I took a long walk through Boston Common. The air was crisp. Leaves crunched beneath our shoes. Tourists milled about with cameras, and kids darted between the paths chasing squirrels. Cassian looked over at me. "That felt different." "It did," I said. "But I'm still guarding my expectations." "You're allowed to. I just don't want to slide back into hoping they'll become who I needed them to be." He nodded thoughtfully. "They won't. But maybe they're becoming people you can respect even if it's a different shape than you imagined." That stopped me, because he was right. The dream of the perfect family? I had let that go. But a family that's trying, that's curious, that's learning to say, "I'm sorry," and actually mean it? That was something worth holding space for. 2 weeks later, I received a formal invitation. A gala. This one wasn't for a wedding or a family charity ball. It was for me. Hosted by a National Women's Leadership Council. Honoring achievements in intelligence and public service. I'd been nominated months earlier, but hadn't thought much about it. I didn't work for applause. I worked because it mattered. Still, when the envelope arrived with my name in elegant calligraphy and the gold seal pressed into the thick paper, something stirred in me. Not pride. Not vanity. Recognition. Someone saw me. And this time, I wasn't hiding. The night of the gala, I wore black. Not as an act of defiance but as a choice. A sleek, commanding silhouette. Clean lines. Silver earrings. No frills. Cassian wore a tailored navy tux. Not to match me. To complement. He never needed the spotlight. He just knew how to hold it when I needed it. When we entered the venue, the ballroom shimmered with warm light and quiet elegance. No fountains. No theatrics. Just purpose. A senator I respected gave the opening remarks. A former CIA director gave the keynote, and when my name was called, I stood calm, poised, ready. Cassian kissed my hand before I walked up the stage stairs. As I reached the podium, I scanned the crowd and saw them, my parents, seated quietly, toward the middle of the room. My mother in a navy sheath dress, my father in a charcoal suit. Not the flashiest table, not front and center, but present, not as critics, as witnesses. Isolda sat between them, tears in her eyes. I took a breath, and I spoke. "I've spent most of my life being underestimated. Dismissed. Told I was too serious, too driven, too intense. I used to believe those things were flaws. But I've learned they're my superpowers. And for every young woman watching who has ever been told she's too much, I want to say this clearly. You are not too much. You are enough. Exactly as you are." Applause thundered through the room. But the loudest echo was inside me, because I had spent years trying to earn seats at other people's tables. Now I was building my own, and people were coming not to validate me, but to learn from me. Later that night, my mother approached me near the exit. "I never knew how powerful you were," she said. "You still don't," I replied gently. "But you're beginning." She nodded. "That's true." And for the first time, she hugged me. Not a stiff, social formality. A real hug. One that said, "I see you." And even if it took 3 decades, it was worth the wait. After the gala, something shifted, not just in how people saw me, but in how I saw myself. For years, I'd measured every step carefully, managed expectations, kept pieces of myself hidden under layers of professionalism and silence. I had mastered the art of being present without being truly visible. But now I was done dimming my light just to make other people comfortable. The very next morning, I received a request to speak on a panel at Georgetown about women in leadership. Normally, I would have declined, too public, too exposed. But this time, I accepted. Cassian raised his eyebrows when I told him. That's new. I think it's time. I said simply. You're ready? I think I always was. I just needed to stop asking for permission. He smiled. Then I'll sit front row, probably next to some freshman who'll think I'm your bodyguard. I mean, you kinda are. He smirked. Honor of my life. The panel was packed. Not just students, but faculty, alumni, and other invited leaders. I sat between a Supreme Court clerk and a UN policy analyst, two women I admired deeply. We talked about navigating male-dominated spaces, about integrity, about owning your voice, and somewhere between question 4 and 5, I shared something I'd never said out loud on a stage. My life changed the day I stopped trying to prove I was worthy of the rooms I entered and started acting like I already belonged in them. The room went still. Then a young woman in the back stood up and asked, "But what if you've never had anyone believe in you?" And I said, "Then be the first. And build from there." That night, Cassian took me to a rooftop jazz bar in D.C. We danced slowly beneath strings of lights, the saxophone crooning through the humid night. "You were incredible," he whispered in my ear. "I was honest," I replied. "That used to scare me. It doesn't anymore." He pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. "I love every version of you. But this one?" He paused. "This one glows." I laughed. "Well, I did use the good highlighter tonight." He shook his head, smiling. "No, it's in your eyes. Your walk. The way you don't second-guess yourself anymore." I rested my head against his chest. The city buzzed around us, but in that moment, I was still home. Back in Boston, family life continued unfolding in unpredictable but mostly positive ways. My mother started asking real questions about my job, not for gossip, but out of genuine interest. She even started attending local women's leadership breakfasts, no longer just to network, but to listen. My father took up journaling. Yes, the same man who once lectured me on practical paths and scoffed at therapy now spent time each morning writing down his reflections. "I find it clarifying," he told me once over coffee. "Slows the spin." I nodded. "That's how it starts." Even Isolde was growing. Her foundation expanded into underserved public schools. Instead of just funding after-school dance programs, she partnered with mental health professionals to create a holistic approach to student wellness. "We can't just offer ballet shoes and expect it to change a life," she told me over brunch. "It's the mentorship, the stability, the message that they matter." I looked at her, both surprised and moved. "That's incredible." She grinned. "Don't act too shocked. I've always had depth." "Really? You once cried over a chipped nail at a sleepover." "I was 8, she huffed. "And dramatic." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "Fair. That's how we were now. Messy, real, a little awkward, but honest. And sometimes that's all a relationship needs to grow." One Sunday afternoon, I hosted a small gathering at our home, nothing fancy. Just family and a few friends. Finger foods, jazz in the background, candles on low. My father brought out old family photo albums. Yes, that happened. He sat with Cassian, flipping through pages filled with pictures I hadn't seen in years. Childhood birthdays, school projects, Halloween costumes. Moments I'd convinced myself no one cared to remember. "I always loved this one," he said, pointing to a picture of me holding a third-place science fair ribbon, beaming. I stared at it. "You never said that." He looked up. "I didn't know how. I thought, if I praised too much, you'd lose your edge. But now I think, I just didn't want to admit I didn't understand you." I didn't cry, but I did place my hand gently on his, and that said enough. Later that evening, Maris and I were washing dishes in the kitchen, laughing about some completely inappropriate joke Derek had made during charades. She glanced at me and said, "You know, it's kind of wild how far everything's come." I nodded. "It really is." "Do you ever think back to that night?" she asked. "The wedding?" "All the time." "What would you change if you could?" I thought about it. "Nothing," I said. "It was awful, humiliating, but necessary." "Why?" "Because I had to break open to rebuild honestly. That moment in the fountain, it was the first time in my life I stopped apologizing for existing." Maris set down the sponge and leaned against the counter. "You know what I admire most about you?" she asked. "I make a killer spinach dip?" She laughed. "Yes. But also, you didn't let pain harden you. You let it sharpen you." That one hit me in the chest. Because she was right, and I hadn't realized it until she said it out loud. That night, after the last guest left, I sat with Cassian on our terrace again, the city stretched out before us, twinkling like a promise. I've been thinking about writing that book again, I said. About the wedding? He asked. No. About what comes after. The quiet revolutions. The small moments that change everything. He nodded. You should call it, After the Fountain. I looked at him. That's actually really good. He smiled. I have my moments. I rested my head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't wondering what would fall apart next. I was wondering what I could build. Because when you stop waiting for someone else to save you, you realize you already have everything you need to begin again. Sometimes the biggest decisions sneak up on you. They don't come with fanfare or dramatic music. Just a quiet tug in your chest, a question that keeps repeating itself, until you finally stop ignoring it. For me, that question arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. In the middle of a briefing on encrypted communications intercepts, we were debriefing a recent operation that involved a complex information leak. Everyone was focused, efficient. My team worked like a well-oiled machine, and yet, my mind wandered. Not out of boredom, but out of clarity. For the first time in years I realized, I didn't want to stay in this role forever. I still loved the mission, still believed in the work. But a voice in me was growing louder. You've proven your point, Briona. You've served. You've led. What do you want now? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew the question wasn't going away. That night, I told Cassian, we were sitting on the floor of our living room, splitting Chinese takeout from little white boxes, our backs against the couch. I've been thinking about stepping down, I said, almost casually. Like I hadn't rehearsed those words in my head 10 times before saying them. He didn't look shocked. When? He asked gently. Not now. Not abruptly. But soon. Maybe 6 months? Maybe a year? He nodded slowly. What would you do instead? I'm not sure. I said. Write maybe. Speak. Mentor younger agents. Build something of my own. Something with less red tape and more heart. Cassian looked at me for a long moment. Whatever you choose, I'm behind you. I sighed in relief. You're really not going to talk me out of it? He grinned. I've never seen you clearer. Why would I stand in the way of that? The next morning, I opened a blank document on my laptop and typed a single sentence. This is not the story of how I broke, it's the story of how I stopped asking for permission to be whole. And just like that, the book began. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my parents. Not even Isolde. I wanted to keep it sacred for a while, just mine. In the evenings, after work, I wrote. Sometimes for an hour. Sometimes until 2 a.m. When Cassian would gently nudge me toward bed and promise that inspiration would still be there in the morning. I wrote about the silent politics of power, about being a woman in rooms built by men. For men, about the loneliness of leadership and the surprising, beautiful moments of connection that keep you going. And, of course, I wrote about the fountain, but not just as a moment of public humiliation. I reframed it as the beginning of everything. One afternoon, about 2 months into writing, I got a message from Sophia. Got a second? I want to talk to you about succession planning. That phrase hit differently. It wasn't code for, you're being replaced, or we're moving you. It was her way of acknowledging what I hadn't said out loud yet. That I was preparing to leave. I met her in our usual back corner conference room. The one with the faulty air conditioning and 2 bright lights. She closed the door and sat across from me. You're ready, she said before I could even open my mouth. I blinked. You think? I know, she replied. You've been more present than ever. Which usually means you're winding something down with intention. I laughed. You always read me too well. She shrugged. It's a gift. Then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. I want to put in for the role. Deputy director. My role. And the thing was, I wasn't surprised. Or threatened. I was proud. Good, I said. You should. She exhaled. I wasn't sure how you'd feel. I feel like I want to leave it in the hands of someone who won't forget why the work matters. She smiled, eyes softening. Thank you. We stood, and she hugged me quickly, professionally, but with real warmth. It was the beginning of the end. But not in a sad way, in a clean, right timing kind of way. That weekend, Cassian and I drove up to the coast. Just the 2 of us. No security detail. No fancy clothes, just hoodies, hiking boots, and the kind of silence that doesn't require effort. We walked along the rocky shoreline for hours. Eventually, we found a secluded cove, sat down on a driftwood log, and stared at the ocean. I think I'm going to tell the director next week, I said. Cassian didn't look surprised. You've already made peace with it, haven't you? I nodded. It's not about leaving something behind. It's about making space for something new. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me something. A small black leather notebook. Unmarked. What's this? Your next chapter, he said. Inside, the first page had one sentence written in his handwriting. Build something that frees others to become who they are. I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Back in Boston, things continued evolving on the home front. My parents had started attending a discussion group for older adults reevaluating family dynamics. Yes, seriously, my mother even started hosting it at their house once a month. Just a few couples, she explained one evening. Talking about growth, regret, legacy. It was surreal, but also deeply human. And somehow, we started falling into a rhythm where history didn't need to be rewritten, but it also didn't need to be relived. One Sunday, as we sat on their back porch sipping iced tea, my father said something I'll never forget. You know, Brionna, for years I thought my job was to mold you into something I recognized. He paused. But what I should have been doing was making space for you to show me who you already were. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't rehearsed, but it hit like truth, and I just said, thank you. No need to dig up the past. We were already living the future. In early fall, I officially gave notice. 12 weeks runway. Plenty of time to onboard Sophia, transition leadership, and tie up loose ends. The announcement went out with a brief statement. Deputy Director Campbell will be stepping down at the end of the quarter to pursue new leadership opportunities in the private and nonprofit sectors. Which was true, but not the whole story. The whole story was, I was choosing me. Not out of selfishness, out of self-respect. The day after the announcement, I received more messages than I could count. Former mentors, junior agents, even reporters. But one note stuck with me. From a field agent I'd mentored years earlier. Director Campbell, thank you for showing me that leadership doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. That boundaries don't make you cold, they make you safe. That your worth isn't tied to who claps for you, but to what you stand for when no one's watching. Thank you for making space. I'm stepping into my own now because I saw you do it first. I read it twice. Then I printed it, folded it carefully, and placed it in the black notebook Cassian had given me. It would be the first page of whatever came next.